This 1899 portrait of a mother and daughter looks calm until you notice what is hidden in the child's eyes. The photograph reached the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C. in the spring of 2017. It came as part of a larger donation of historical items from a private collector in South Carolina. It was a simple portrait. A black woman and her young daughter, about 6 or 7 years old, posed in a photography studio. The woman sat straight in a wooden chair. Her face looked dignified, tired. The child stood next to her, with one small hand resting on her mother's shoulder. Both wore their best dresses, neatly pressed and decorated with simple lace collars. The photograph was dated 1899 and taken in Charleston, South Carolina. Dr. Jennifer Hayes, a curator who studied African American history after Reconstruction, was sorting through the donation when she first looked at the portrait. She held it with care and noticed the photographer's mark pressed in the corner, Wesley & Sons Photography, Charleston, SC. The image was in very good condition. The sepia colors were still deep and clear, even after more than 100 years. Jennifer put it aside with many other photos, planning to add it to the museum's collection of late 19th century family pictures. But something about the photograph kept bothering her. She kept coming back to it during the day, looking closely at the faces of the mother and daughter. There was something in their expressions, especially the child's, that felt troubling. The girl's eyes were wide open and did not blink. She stared straight at the camera with a strong look that seemed too serious for a child her age. Her mouth was set in a straight line, not exactly a frown, but not the usual forced smile seen in many old portraits. Jennifer decided to scan the photograph at high resolution, which was normal for protecting old images. She placed it gently on the museum's special scanner and adjusted the settings to catch every detail. The machine made a soft sound while it worked. A few minutes later, a clear digital file showed up on her computer screen. She zoomed in first on the woman's face, noting the lines around her eyes, the set of her jaw, and the careful way her hand rested in her lap. Then she turned to the child. Jennifer made the image even larger, focusing on the girl's face, and that is when she saw it. At first, she thought it was just a mark or damage on the photo, but as she zoomed closer, her breath stopped. There, reflected in the child's eyes, small and hard to see but clear once you noticed it, was an image that should not be there. It was a silhouette of a human figure hanging in the air from what looked like a tree branch. The reflection was tiny and bent by the shape of the child's eye, but it was real. Jennifer's hand started to shake as she understood what this meant. She zoomed in more, changing the contrast and brightness, trying to tell herself she was mistaken. But the clearer the image became, the more certain she was. The child had been watching a lynching, and the photographer had caught it forever in the reflection of a 6-year-old girl's eyes. Jennifer could not sleep that night. She lay in her apartment in Northeast D.C., staring at the ceiling. Her mind kept thinking about what she had found. The picture troubled her deeply, not only because of the horror of the lynching, but also because a child had seen it, a photographer had recorded it, and it stayed hidden for more than a century. The next morning, she reached the museum early and went right to the archives. She needed to learn more about Wesley & Sons Photography, the studio that took the portrait. She searched the museum's records of old businesses in the American South. She checked census records, city directories, and newspaper ads from Charleston in the 1890s. Wesley & Sons was a well-known photography studio in Charleston from 1887 to 1903. It was run by a white photographer named Edmund Wesley and later by his sons Thomas and Robert. The studio offered portrait services and other photography. City records showed it served both white and black customers, though probably in separate sessions as was usual in the Jim Crow South. What Jennifer found next made her feel ill. In old Charleston newspaper files, she saw several mentions of Edmund Wesley linked to public events in the late 1890s. One article from 1897 said Wesley had been hired by local officials to photograph important civic meetings. Another from 1899 noted that his studio supplied pictures for different community events. She searched further through records of lynchings in South Carolina at that time. Details were limited because many lynchings were not reported or were hidden by local officials, but a few cases appeared in northern newspapers from anti-lynching groups. In August 1899, Only weeks before the portrait date, a black man named Isaiah was lynched in Charleston. The newspaper report was short and cold. It said Isaiah, a colored man accused of assault on a white woman, was taken from jail by a mob and hanged. Authorities were investigating. No deeper investigation happened. No one was arrested. His full name was never given, nor was the name of the woman. It was, Jennifer realized with horror, just one more case in the long record of racial violence after Reconstruction. She opened the high-resolution image again and zoomed in on the child's eyes. The reflection showed a figure hanging from a tree, and in the background she could see faint shapes of other people, a crowd. This was not a hidden nighttime killing. It was a public event, a lynching watched by dozens or hundreds, and Edmund Wesley or one of his sons had been there to record it. Jennifer sat back feeling sick. Had Wesley been hired to photograph the lynching, or had he simply gone there like many others to watch? And how had this portrait, taken around the same time and place, captured that awful image in the child's eyes? She knew she needed help. This was no longer just an old artifact. It was proof of a crime, a record of violence, and a view into the daily terror black families faced. Jennifer called Dr. Marcus Ellison, a historian at Howard University who studied lynchings and racial violence in the South. If anyone could help her understand this, it was him. Marcus came to the museum 2 days later. His face was serious as Jennifer took him to her office. She had sent him early scans, but he wanted to see the original photo. She gave it to him carefully. He held it up to the light and studied it quietly for a long time. "I have seen hundreds of photos from this time," he said softly. "Family portraits, studio pictures, and special images, but nothing like this." He put the photograph down and looked at Jennifer. "Do you know who they are? The mother and daughter?" "Not yet," Jennifer said. The donation had very little information, just a note that the items came from an estate sale in Charleston. No names or family details. Marcus nodded with a tight jaw. "We need to find out who they were and what exactly happened that day." Over the next weeks, Marcus and Jennifer worked together to rebuild the story of August 1899 in Charleston. They searched newspaper files, court papers, church records, and writings from anti-lynching activists. Slowly, the events became clearer. Isaiah, the man who was lynched, had been a farm worker on a plantation near Charleston. He was accused of making unwanted advances toward a white woman. The proof was weak and came only from her statement. He was arrested, held for 2 days, and then, on the evening of August 14th, a mob of about 50 white men broke into the jail, took him out, and hanged him from an oak tree in a public square. The lynching had been planned ahead. Word spread through town and handbills were passed around. Like many lynchings then, it was a public show meant to scare the black community and keep the racial order of the Jim Crow South. People said hundreds attended, including women and children. Some brought food. Photographers sold picture postcards of the scene later. Marcus found a note about Edmund Wesley in the diary of a Charleston minister who opposed the lynching. The entry from August 15th, 1899 said, "The photographer Wesley was at the lynching of the colored man Isaiah yesterday. He set up his camera and took several pictures of the crowd and the victim. I spoke to him after and asked how he could take part in such evil. He said he was only recording history. I told him he was recording sin." Jennifer felt sick reading those words. Wesley had been there with his camera, treating the murder like any other event worth remembering. Then, soon after, a black mother and her daughter came to his studio for their portrait. "Why would they go to him?" Jennifer asked, her voice shaking. "Why would a black family visit the studio of a man who had just photographed a lynching?" Marcus stayed quiet for a moment. Maybe they did not know, or maybe they had no other choice. Wesley could have been the only photographer in Charleston who served black clients. But there is another idea. He looked at her with a serious face. Maybe the mother wanted a record. Maybe she wanted to save what her daughter had seen and document the violence they had to face. A quiet form of proof. Finding the names of the mother and daughter was very hard. Unlike white families, black families in the Jim Crow South had fewer official records. Births, marriages, and deaths were often not written down or kept in separate and incomplete books. Photos were costly, and many were lost or thrown away over time. Jennifer and Marcus started with the 1900 census, looking for black families in Charleston with young daughters. There were many possibilities, but without names or addresses it was tough. They checked baptism records from black churches, hoping to find a child born around 1892 or 1893 who matched the girl. Marcus contacted genealogists and historians in South Carolina. He posted pictures of the portrait online and asked if anyone knew the faces or had family stories. Many people replied with their own photos and memories, but none matched. Weeks became months. Jennifer kept doing her regular work, but the portrait stayed on her mind. She kept a copy on her desk and looked at it often, studying the mother's tired face and the child's wide, serious eyes. She felt she had a duty. These women should be known by name, not left as unknown figures from the past. Then in early November, Marcus got an email from a woman named Patricia Dawson, a retired librarian in Columbia, South Carolina. She had seen his post and thought she might have details. Her great-grandmother had lived in Charleston in the 1890s and had talked about seeing a lynching as a child. Patricia had old family papers, letters, a Bible with birth dates, and was ready to share them. Marcus and Jennifer drove to Columbia the next weekend. Patricia welcomed them kindly into her home filled with books and family pictures. She showed them items on her dining table, an old leather Bible, tied letters, and a small framed photo. "This is my great-grandmother, Ada," Patricia said, pointing to the picture. It showed an older woman in her 60s, with lined skin but bright, sharp eyes. She died in 1964, but Patricia remembered her stories about growing up in Charleston and the dangers for black people after Reconstruction. Marcus opened the Bible to the family page. In faded ink were names and dates. Ada Price, born March 12, 1893, in Charleston, SC, daughter of Esther Price and Robert Price. Jennifer's heart beat faster. "Do you have any pictures of Ada as a child?" Patricia said no, only the later one. But she gave them a letter. Her grandmother had saved it. Ada wrote it when she was older about her early years. Patricia read part of it. "Mama took me to the photographer in the summer of 1899. I did not want to go. I had seen something awful the day before that I could not forget. But Mama said we needed the picture because it was important. She said someday people would need to know what we went through." Jennifer read the letter with shaky hands. The writing was clear but old. Ada wrote it in 1958, during the growing civil rights movement. The letter went on. "I was 6 years old when I saw them hang that man. Mama tried to cover my eyes, but I had already seen. He was innocent. Everyone knew it, but no one said it out loud. The white people came from everywhere to watch. They cheered when he stopped moving. I had bad dreams for years. Mama said we had to stay strong and not let them see us break. The next day she took me to the photographer's studio. I remember the man who took our picture. He had been there at the hanging. I knew his camera. Mama must have known too, but said nothing. She held my hand and told me to look straight at the camera so they could see what they had done to us." Marcus sat back with his eyes closed. She remembered everything. Jennifer asked Patricia if Ada had ever spoken to her about it. Patricia nodded. As a teenager, she had asked about life in the Jim Crow South. Ada told her the day of the lynching changed her forever. She stopped feeling like a child that day. But it also taught her that staying quiet meant helping the wrong side. That is why she joined the NAACP and marched for rights. She felt she owed it to that man. Jennifer compared the old photo of Ada with the child in the 1899 portrait. The eyes were the same, wide, intense, and full of heavy feeling for such a young face. "This is her," Jennifer said. "This is Ada." Marcus searched for information on Esther, Ada's mother. He found a marriage record from 1888. Esther Johnson, age 19, married Robert Price, age 24, in Charleston. There was also a death record for Robert in 1897 from pneumonia, leaving Esther to raise Ada alone. Esther was a widow raising her daughter in 1890s Charleston, Marcus said. "That was very hard. Patricia showed a faded receipt from Wesley and Sons dated August 16, 1899, the day after the lynching. It was for Mrs. Esther Price for one family portrait, $2.50. Jennifer stared at it. That was a lot of money for a widow then. Esther used money she might have needed for food or rent. Why? What made her go to that studio? She was making a record, Marcus said. She could not speak out loud. That would have been dangerous in 1899 Charleston. But she could do this. She could bring her daughter there and create a picture knowing someone might one day look close enough to see the hidden truth. It was a quiet way to fight back. Patricia wiped her eyes. My great-grandmother lived to 71. She saw the civil rights movement and black people pushing back against Jim Crow. I think she would be happy her story is finally told. With names for Ada and Esther, Marcus and Jennifer went back to Charleston to find the exact lynching spot. Records pointed to a public square in the center of town, but the city had changed a lot. They looked at old maps at the public library. A librarian named Thomas, an older black man who grew up there, knew the place right away. It was Hampton Square, now gone and turned into a parking lot in the 1920s. They drove there. Cars filled the spaces where the oak tree once stood. No marker remembered what happened. Jennifer stood there feeling the heavy silence of forgotten history. They wanted people to forget, she said. They wanted to hide it. That's why Esther's photograph matters, Marcus replied. It is proof that cannot be removed. They talked to older residents. Most were uneasy about old painful stories. But one woman, Mrs. Dorothy Hughes, age 89, shared what her grandmother told her. My grandmother was there that day. She was about 10. Her mother brought her, because that's what happened then. White people wanted black people to see the price of stepping out of line. Her grandmother never forgot the man's scared face or how he said he was innocent. She remembered seeing a woman with a little girl crying and trying to pull her away. She always wondered about that child. Jennifer felt a chill. Could that have been Esther and Ada? Mrs. Hughes said many black people were forced to watch. If they stayed away, it could bring danger. So they went, watched, and tried not to show their tears. Back in Washington, Jennifer and Marcus put together the full story of August 1899. They had names, dates, places, and personal accounts. Marcus wrote an article for a history journal. Jennifer planned a museum exhibition around the portrait and the larger story of lynching in the South. Many people sent messages moved by Ada's story. Some wanted documentaries or memorials, but a few sent angry notes saying to leave the past alone. Jennifer deleted them but felt their sting. The photo had become a strong reminder that old pain still affects today. Later, Patricia called excited. She found Ada's diary with an entry about the photograph. January 15, 1963. I am old now and my memory is weaker, but I remember that day in 1899 clearly. I remember the heat, the fear, the crowd noise. I remember Mama holding my hand tight. I remember seeing the man hanging and knowing they killed him for no reason. I remember the photographer taking pictures like it was a party. When Mama took me to his studio the next day, I wanted to run, but she said we had to do it so they could see what they did. My eyes in that picture hold the truth. Someday someone will look close enough. Ada wanted the photo shared so people would know. Jennifer promised they would honor that wish. The exhibition called Witness, A Child's Eyes and the Truth They Hold opened in March 2018. The main piece was Esther and Ada's portrait in a special case with lighting that let visitors see the reflection in Ada's eyes from the right angle. Panels explained lynching history, the 1899 events, and their story. Old and new pictures of the square were shown. Ada's words from her letter and diary were on the walls. Marcus spoke at the opening. For too long, stories of racial violence have been hidden or softened. We honor Confederate monuments but forget the thousands killed in their time. This photograph is strong proof. It cannot be denied. Ada Price carried this pain all her life but also carried the truth. Now we can all see what they lived through. Thousands came to see it. Many cried. Schools used it to teach about Jim Crow. The photo spread online and started important talks. Patricia and family visited and felt moved. Protesters appeared outside, but supporters were many more. Later, Charleston added a historical marker at the old square site. It remembered Isaiah and the era of racial terror. Jennifer, Marcus, and family attended the quiet ceremony with songs and silence. The photo led to school lessons in several states and was added to the Equal Justice Initiative Memorial in Alabama. Ada's story reached millions through exhibits, books, and classes. 5 years later, Jennifer sat in her office thinking about it all. The portrait stayed safe in the museum collection and online for everyone. She received letters from people touched by the story, including a young girl who wanted to become a historian. Jennifer kept the letter near the portrait. Esther and Ada had done their part by saving this testimony. Now others must keep sharing the truth so the memory of those who suffered lives on. Ada's eyes would always bear witness.